Alright, so it's the end of the year, and like last year, I'm doing the worst and best movies of the current year, which is 2023. Now, I had a blast making these last year, and I've kind of been looking forward to doing this series of videos again all year. And unlike a lot of other people on YouTube, I'm doing the worst first, and then I will do the best last. Especially since those two movies I don't expect to be terrible, that I'm waiting to see if it's worthy of the best movies of the year. If they turn out to surprise me and end up being some of the worst, I'll make an addendum to them at the beginning of my best movies of the year video. I will not be going over this video the best movies of the year. I'm going over the worst movies I saw this year. And yeah. It's gonna get a little spicy, ladies. Okay, so real quick before I continue on, any footage I use in this, you're going to see in the little bottom corner, fair use matters, simply because a lot of these companies will just throw a copyright strike automatically on using trailer footage, and even though I'm completely justified in using trailer footage when I'm talking about this certain thing, they can be kind of bitches and will just go, no, you can't use it, especially when they see the title is worst movies of the year. So that's why you'll see that in the bottom corner for all footage. You won't see that with best movies of the year. Funny that. And I want to start off with 3 dishonorable mentions that were kind of on the list for the longest time, but they got knocked out, and I felt they were worth mentioning still. So I'll kind of start off with those, and basically it's going from my least hated to my most hated movie, especially with the dishonorable mentions. So it'll kind of start off there, and then it'll go through the top 11 worst films of the year. So with my dishonorable mentions, the first one is Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Now, I know a lot of people really enjoyed this film, and in all fairness, the acting's pretty solid. The story was entertaining. The effects were pretty decent, all things considered. And so you're thinking, well, if you like the story, acting, effects, why is this close to being one of the worst films of the year? Well, it's very simple. This movie is not open to newcomers to the Dungeons & Dragons universe. This movie basically expects you to be a level 33 dungeon master to be able to follow this, because nowhere in this movie is there like a soft sort of opening getting you into the world of this universe like you saw with the Lord of the Rings film. You can go completely cold fresh into the Lord of the Rings films, especially the first one, and have no knowledge of Middle Earth, and that opening will get you caught up and like, okay, so long ago there was Middle Earth. It does that great opening that just catches you up to speed. This movie does not do that. It basically just expects you to know right off the bat what this world is and what everything does in it. And every single little thing in this movie has some cryptic, crazy backstory, like this is the pen of Avi Fox, which was used during the Dark Crusade of the Second Witch Rebellion. And like all that, it's like, what is any of that? And then another object is like, this is the crown of Sinafata, which was used during the Witch Rebellion in the Third Age. And it's just like, they keep slapping on all of this intricate exposition on items that never come into play. I had no idea really who the bad guys were. I had no idea what the world was even called. And I've played Dungeons & Dragons like 5 times in my life, so I'm not a complete novice when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm not that casual either, and even someone who has experienced the game a couple of times was completely lost. So for that, I feel that the movie failed, and hopefully if that sequel that was announced is going to happen, they do a better job informing the non-D&D players into what this world is. And then my next dishonorable mention is Warhorse 1. Now this is a more obscure movie, but I was very interested in trying it because it's a Johnny Strong film. If you don't know who he is, he's the lead singer for the band Operator. He was one of the Navy SEALs in Black Hawk Down, and he's done some of these like independent movies that are of remarkable quality, like Sinners and Saints and Daylight's End, both of which are really solid indie films. They have some problems, but like they're worth a watch. I should do I don't think you've seen this film segment on those two films. And so when I heard he was doing another movie, it's like, oh cool, I want to see what it is. And Warhorse 1 was pretty disappointing to me, especially the first half. The camera work is sloppy and chaotic. It does get better, but like the first 20 to 30 minutes of the movie, I was like real close to just hitting stop and like, yeah, I'm out. I mean, the actors, the two guys acting at the beginning of the movie are so bad at acting that the child actor in this film is a superior actor to them. That is bad when a child actor is better than the adult actors. Now, does this movie have some fun, entertaining action sequences? Yes. Are there a couple of good acting scenes with the child actor and Johnny Strong? Yes. But this movie was not as good as his other endeavors, and so that was unfortunate in my eyes. And then the last dishonorable mention is Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Now, this was on the list for the longest time, and like, when the first Shazam movie came out, it was very surprising to me because I wasn't about that interested in it, but I tried it. It's like, you know what? That was a good comedy. It had a lot of heart, and it had some really great moments of acting. I enjoyed the fill-in and the danger dynamic with him and the villain, and like just overall, first Shazam film, solid movie. I tried the second one, and it has like none of that. There's some funny scenes, but I wasn't invested in the villains, I wasn't invested in the stakes, and it just was kind of meh to me. It was kind of boring, and they had dragons in this one, and it was just like, I don't care. And I find it funny that it's yet another movie starring Rachel Zegler that's a bomb. Like, I don't know of a movie she's been in that has been successful, and yet she still keeps getting movie roles. So, whoever her agent is, I want that agent. Now on to the list. The 11 worst movies I saw this year. And number 11 is Heart of Stone. So, when it comes to spy movies with a female lead, there are some really excellent ones out there. Whether you're looking at, Point of No Return, Salt, Atomic Blonde, or one of my favorites, Long Kiss Goodnight. You can have a really awesome spy movie with a female lead. It is possible, it has been done. So when I heard that Wonder Woman was going to be in an international spy thriller, it's like, yeah, I'm interested. I want to try that. But when I watched the movie, the issue was it did nothing new. It was, for the most part, boring, not because there wasn't enough action, because it didn't do anything new. Every single element of this movie I have seen in another spy thriller before. And so it just led me to having this feeling of just like, I've been here, I've done that with plenty of spy films. And I've heard a lot of people say that the actress who plays Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, which I've always pronounced her name as, I've heard some people call Gadot. I've heard a lot of people say she's a terrible actress, and I've always kind of been willing to, like, defend her. Like, look, she's from another country, she hasn't quite nailed the accent yet. No, she had some bad moments of acting in this. Now, I'm not going to say that she ruined the movie, because I don't think she was the worst part of this film. No, like, the worst part of this film is I didn't care about any of the characters. There was this one, like, supporting character that they start off as a bad guy, but they really were trying to turn into a good guy, and it didn't work. And, like, the only two things I really liked about this film was, yeah, the opening sequence with the illuminated paraglider at night was cool looking. I'll give it that. And for skydiving sequences goes, this one was pretty good. There have been some really shitty skydiving sequences in action movies in the past couple years, especially The Gray Man. That thing was atrocious in terms of the skydiving scene. It's actually a fun movie, but with this movie, the skydiving scene actually looked pretty good. So I will give it credit there. But like some of the surprises I saw coming from miles away, it wasn't interesting, and just overall, they really want this to be like the start of like a new female James Bond series, and this is not the start of a new female James Bond series. So at number 10 is Blue Beetle. Now, this movie was already doomed from the start with the stupid Batman's a fascist line. Okay, I could spend an hour explaining how the creative behind the decision to have that in a trailer is a fucking moron. But besides that, I decided to give the movie a try. Once it was out of theaters and on digital, and you know, had already failed, I decided to give it a try. And just watching this movie again, like the last film, boring, because it was doing nothing new. That's one of the issues with superhero films now, is that you can't just do what has been done before. You have to innovate. You have to come up with new things. I don't need to see another movie like Spider-Man, because I've seen Spider-Man. I don't need to see another movie like Spider-Man 2, because I've already seen that movie. And so when you have the movie act exactly like hundreds of other films that have come before it, it's not interesting. The only thing interesting about this movie was the suit that the main character found, okay? It's kind of cool. I like the idea of it, but that's it. Nothing else worked with this movie. Guess what the main villain was? A villain who had the same exact powers as the hero, okay? That's boring. And then the real main villain is a rich white asshole, which we have seen done to death over 450 million fucking times. If I see one more superhero movie where the main villain is a rich asshole, I am going to lose my collective shit, okay? You have a character that has this amazing, like, godly, like, superpower where, he can go into space and he can craft things, and it's just, like, this really amazing thing. And the main villain is a rich asshole, okay? Like, do something creative at least. Like, make the main villain, like, this intellectual virus that's infecting the population, and how do you fight against a virus? Like, at least that would have been interesting. Or have the main villain, I don't know, an alien, since, the hero is part alien himself. That would have been kind of cool, but no, they just went with the, let's do a class warfare message thing here, where the bad guy's the rich asshole, like we've seen in hundreds of other superhero movies. It's like, yeah, this movie was uninspired, it was boring, and like, even with, towards the end, just out of the blue, Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart kicks off. And it's like, nowhere in the movie did, like, set up for this. Okay, it's just like, did someone in the movie listen to Motley Crue? Like, and like the scene had no impact for me. I was just kind of waiting for the movie to get over with. Whereas in Godzilla, there's a scene at the end of that movie where they have a very overused iconic theme, the Godzilla theme, and the way they use it is so incredible that I was just like, even though I've heard the theme a million times before. So it's not that, oh, well, the only reason why you didn't like it in Blue Beetle was because you've heard that song a million times before. No, it's because they didn't use it right. And so, yeah, Blue Beetle, I mean, it's worth watching once, but only once, and never again. And number 9 is Asteroid City. So with Wes Anderson, I'm not the biggest Wes Anderson fan. I like some of his movies, like Rushmore, and probably my favorite would be Life Aquatic. And, like, I enjoyed Grand Budapest Hotel and a few of his others. And with this, it's like, okay, the cast is pretty impressive with this film, so I'm going to give it a try. And the words I would describe this movie are pretentious and full of oneself. Because that's how this movie felt. It felt like Wes Anderson was just so full of himself that he was like, I'm just going to throw a bunch of random shit on the screen and people will praise me for it. And he's one of those directors, he can do no wrong. Okay, he can make a complete pile of shit and everyone would still like, bravo, bravo to him. And so he's one of those directors. And yes, he has done some good films in the past. This is not one of them. I felt like there was a lot of elements in this film that were completely useless and unnecessary. Like, in the credits, I saw that Jeff Goldblum is in this film. But he has a, like, 20-second blink and you'll miss a cameo where he says one line. And it's like, that was enough for him to get billing in the opening credits. And, like, the entire play production felt completely unnecessary. I would do a movie about a play production or do the story that the play production is about. Trying to do both at the same time is just weird and like you're full of yourself when you try doing that. So look, some people might really like Asteroid City. I didn't like it, and it's probably an acquired taste. And number 8 is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, surprisingly, I thought this was going to be like my number 1 pick from all the things I heard about it, but in all honesty, it wasn't as bad as that, but it was still really disappointing. So, basically, they did decisions in this movie that any normie would have said, hey, you probably shouldn't do this. That's kind of a bad idea. And yet, they did it anyway. Like, one of the things that makes no sense, and I hope you already know that all the movies I talk about on this list are going to involve some kind of spoiler, but I don't think you should watch these movies, so I don't think it's terrible. But in the movie, Indiana Jones' son that was introduced in the fourth one, it's the fourth one. Yeah, him in the Crystal Skull. He's killed off screen. He died in Vietnam, and basically Indiana Jones is broken. He's separated from his wife, and it's just miserable. And like just everyone's miserable in this movie, and it's like I was kind of hoping for a sense of adventure with this. And even like the adventure he goes on, it's not he's going on one last adventure to save the world or to, you know, just go for that adventure. He's going because he's trying to clear his name with the authorities. And he's just like begrudgingly going. And that's how I felt with this movie. I felt like I was begrudgingly forced into this adventure because no one really wants to be here. And like, with the first 3 Indiana Jones films, like almost all the effects are practically done. And even with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, while a lot of those effects were CGI, there was still a lot of practically done effects in that movie. In this movie, like 99% of all of the action sequences and effects were CGI. There was barely any practical effects that I saw, and it took something away from what the original films did. It took like that sense of like wonder and amazement that like you saw with those first movies. And like just kind of the way the movie ends, it's like it felt like they ran out of money, which isn't hard to believe since the budget was like over $300 million or something ridiculous to that effect. And so like just in the end, this movie felt soulless. It didn't have that like charming sense of adventure that I was hoping to get with this film. At number 7 is a more obscure unknown movie called Bunker. This is an independent World War I horror film, and I'm always attracted to like period piece horror films because it's not that common to see, especially with like something like World War I. And I'll give credit where credit's due. This could have been an amazing movie. And the first like 10 to 15 minutes of this movie are excellent. I mean, well paced. It sets up everything nicely. It's like, hey, we got word that this bunker has been abandoned by the Germans, or either like our bunker was recaptured or something. Anyway, this unit is going to this bunker to claim it in the First World War. And so it's a great setup. It's a great like, what are they going to find in that bunker? Okay, like this great like mystery. And once they get to the bunker, it comes to a grueling crawl of pacing. Like just the movie just crashes once they get into the bunker, because it just becomes this like slow burn psychological thriller where people are like psychologically dying throughout the bunker. And when they get down to like the last couple of people, in the final 3 minutes, they introduce a creature that actually looks pretty decent. And it's like, you don't even get it for 5 minutes. You get it for 3 minutes, and then the movie's over. And it's like, why would you not have that be the movie? Why not have it where this creature is moving throughout the bunker system and killing these guys? Instead, they were doing this slow burn psychological thriller, like one guy dies from fright, one guy dies from poisoning, and it's just slow and boring. And it's like, I would have been less offended if they didn't have a creature at the last 3 minutes of the film. And so it could have been better, but it was such a disappointment. At number 6 is Transformers Rise of the Beast. So I normally will cut Transformers some slack because I'm going to a Transformers movie to see giant skyscraper tall Transformers beat the shit out of each other. You know, getting that life-size vibe from it. And usually the stories suck, but I mean, if you're going to a Transformer movie for the story, you have a lot of problems, okay? So, when I tried out this movie, Rise of the Beasts, it was like, I felt like this didn't want to be a Transformers movie, because the first like half hour, apart from the very opening, it's like no Transformers, and it's this very racist messaging, like, oh, did you know that white people are evil? It's like, okay. And then it continues on with, oh, by the way, white people are assholes. Like, what? And then it continues on with, oh, just in case you didn't know, white people are the worst. And I'm just like, we are going to see some Transformers at some point in this movie, right? And then finally we get Transformers, and it's like, they make Optimus Prime like a bitch who can't fight. There's a bunch of obnoxious Transformers. Why do people keep trying to make Pete Davidson a thing? Okay, the guy looks like a used cigarette butt that's been floating in the gutter for 3 weeks. I don't get the attraction to Pete Davidson. And like the jokes don't really land, the characters are obnoxious, they throw in an Iron Man suit at the end, and then get this, they decide to have the main threat in this reboot, like chapter 1 reboot, basically Thanos. Like, imagine if they were rebooting the MCU and the first movie they start off with is Endgame. It's like, why? Like, why are you starting off here? Like, the only part I remotely liked was the crossover tease in the final moments of the film. Like, that was kind of cool, but then I remembered, yeah, no, I don't want this racist asshole director making this. So, no, I'm glad this bombed, because I have no interest in seeing anything else from this racist asshole that made a racist movie. So, you know what? Fuck this movie. I mean, I couldn't stand it. And number 5 is The Mother. So, I was kind of intrigued by this movie simply because Jennifer Lopez rarely does serious dramatic acting. She usually does these weird, like, comedies that don't really work, in my opinion. And every now and then you'll get something like The Cell, which one could argue was plagiarized by Inception. That'd be an interesting story for another time. But, like, I saw the ad for this. It's like, okay, so she's going to be playing, like, a former assassin, and, like, this could be interesting. And, like, there are some really solid female assassin movies out there, like Colombiana, which is another movie that I should do. I don't think you've seen this film on. But besides that, I tried this movie, and it didn't work. I mean, case in point, you want to see a movie that kind of had this same kind of setup, especially with the third act, but did it better, you should try Lou, that starred Allison Janney. Like, that worked so much better than this film. And, like, they tried having this scene where, like, showing you how dark and edgy Jennifer Lopez can get, her character can get, and she starts waterboarding a guy, and it's like, yeah, go talk to anyone who's actually been in combat and actually has experienced interrogation. Waterboarding's like Little League compared to, like, the evil, screwed up shit that Major League interrogators do. So when I saw that in the movie, it's like, okay, you guys are just coming off as amateurish now. But, I mean, like, the main villain, it's like, this movie, you know, is trying to do stuff that has been done in better movies, like The Long Kiss Goodnight. The premises are eerily similar between The Mother and Long Kiss Goodnight, so I would recommend watching The Long Kiss Goodnight over The Mother. And number 4 is The Flash. And there were elements in this movie I did like. Case in point, I liked Michael Keaton as Batman again, and I didn't think I would, but I liked Sasha Calle, I can't remember her name, as Supergirl. I didn't think I would like her, but I actually did enjoy her character in this movie. But apart from that, like, one, I already was turned off because of the insane, crazy shit that the psychotic lead actor was doing in the years before this movie finally came out. And, like, the story is a half-ass attempt at the Flashpoint storyline. And it's done in a time when multiverses are being done to death, which I think there is still potential for doing interesting stories in terms of multiverses, but the way studios are doing it, they're just doing it so that they can have 27 of one kind of character. It's like, yeah, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You should actually be trying some other interesting things besides just trying to have 100 Spider-Men. But even forgetting the multiverse story, just the main actor got even more obnoxious from his stint in the Justice League film. I mean, which I didn't think was possible, but no, like, he got his voice even more obnoxious since then. And, like, some of the things they've done, especially with CGI, like, most of the CGI in this movie are atrocious. You just have to look at, the Henry Cavill Superman or the CGI babies at the beginning. What the hell are those? But I mean, like, this movie felt soulless almost. I mean, there's some fun moments with Michael Keaton and Supergirl, and there are some cool things at the end with, like, the Kryptonian invasion, but ultimately, I didn't care for this movie, and I may watch it one more time simply because it's a box office bomb. It's one of the biggest box office bombs of all time, and it's pretty close to, like, the #1 spot. So when I get to that in my box office bomb series, I'll probably do an individual video on it again. So yeah, you got an idea of what that box office bomb video is going to be like. At number 3 is Renfield. Now, when I saw the trailers for this movie, the only thing really exciting me about it was Nicolas Cage as Dracula. And I will admit, Nicolas Cage does a wonderful job as Dracula in this movie. The problem, he's the only good part about this movie. This movie made some really bad decisions. Like, one, it does that stupid thing where they take an obscure character like Renfield. It's like, hey, let's give him superpowers and maybe we can turn him into a thing. That happens so much in movies now, and it's like, when was Renfield able to do this? Like, if he eats bugs, he's super strong and fast, and he's like Superman. It's like, I don't remember this at all from any movie or story I've read. And then there's this entire subplot about a criminal organization, and technically Dracula's not the main villain. He's a villain, but so is this crime family and all of their henchmen. There's this female cop trying to expose their corruption, but they own all the police. And it's like, this feels like something that you would have seen in a 24 episode series, but not in an hour-and-a-half movie. Like, seriously, Dracula is big enough of a villain to be the entire focal point in an hour-and-a-half movie, but instead they cram in this crime family as well. And so, because of that, Dracula's barely in the movie. And so, the good part of the movie is barely in the movie. I didn't like Nicholas Hoult as Renfield. He's done good movies before, and while Awkwafina has made me laugh plenty of times before, even in Shang-Chi, I didn't find her funny in this movie at all. There was a couple moments I chuckled, but like ultimately in the end, I was so glad for this movie to be over, and I was glad it was only 90 minutes, because the only good part was Nicolas Cage. It's like, this could have been a cool movie, but it wasn't. At number 2, and this was my #1 pick for the longest time, until the #1 pick kicked it out, and that was Ghosted. Now, when I saw a trailer for Ghosted, it's like, okay, this seems like a fun rom-com. Basically, this average guy, he meets the girl of his dreams, and she turns out to be like an international spy, and he gets dragged on an adventure with her. It's like, I was getting a lot of Night and Day vibes from this premise, which is a far better movie, and I would recommend you watch that over this. I should do, I don't think you've seen video on Night and Day as well, but this movie failed everywhere where Night and Day succeeded. Case in point, the two leads in this movie hate each other. Like, they first meet just screaming at each other, and then throughout most of the movie, like 95% of this movie, is just the two leads being absolutely vicious and toxic at each other in the most heinous ways. And there's only a couple moments peppered in where it's like there's some like connection going on, but it's like, no, we got 30 minutes left, and you're not going to convince me that these people love each other in 30 minutes. And they do this half-ass, ending where they, like, are soulmates now. And it's like, no. At no point did I feel like these people belong together. Now, there's a really freaking awesome, like, cameo sequence in the middle where, because Chris Evans in this, they decided to have a whole bunch of, like, Marvel actors cameo in the middle sequence, and it was freaking hilarious. But that was not enough to save this film. A lot of great cameos in this film of other actors, just real quick, it's like, oh shit, that guy. But they weren't enough to save this movie. And, like, the main male lead also felt really unbelievable, because you have a guy, he's been stuck in one place his entire life. He's always wanted to travel the world. And he's now traveling the world with this international spy, and he's pissed off that she lied to him. And he will not let that go. And it's like, dude, you expected her to tell you she was a spy the first time you met? Like, honestly, if I was in that situation, it's like, okay, it kind of sucks you lied to me, but I get it, because you had no idea if I was a KGB agent or not. Like, it's not that egregious of a thing to be pissed off about, and yet he is. He will not let it go. And it's like, you look at Night and Day, and from, like, the beginning, Cameron Diaz's character finds out that Tom Cruise is a spy, and, like, she gets dragged on this adventure, and, like, at a certain point in the movie, she kind of starts going with it. It's like, hey, look, I'm in Paris, I'm in, the Swiss Alps, it's like, it's scary, but you know what, I'm going to make the best of the situation I can. And so where that worked, this did not. This movie did not work for me at all. I was waiting for it to end. I hated this movie so much. And it's just, I was glad for it to be over. And then at number 1, the worst movie I saw this year. And yes, you're gonna go, you should have known that, man, but let me explain. The worst movie I saw this year was Slaughterhouse. Okay, so if you don't know what Slaughterhouse is about, it is about a sorority on a college campus where a new sorority member brings in a sloth that she bought on the black market and uses it to try and win sorority president. You can already see I'm not a huge fan of this film. But when I went in this movie, I was expecting this to be so stupid, cheesy fun that I was going to love it. I was expecting to see some really fun, creative kills from an evil sloth, and I got none of that. Because this movie is so obnoxious. Every character I wanted to see die. There was not one character in this movie I didn't want to see die a horrible death. And I don't get to see that because every time the sloth kills someone, it's like off screen and it's in passing in a montage. It's like, you just see the sloth like raise a knife and then it cuts to another scene. And it's like, wait a minute. 1, when did the sloth learn how to use a knife? 2, did that person survive or make it? I don't know. 3, like, how is the sloth able to drive a car? Like, this movie gets dumber and dumber the further you go, and, like, finally towards the end, you finally start seeing the sloth, like, kill people, but it's not even fun, creative ways. It's like, just, the sloth puts a bottle down in front of someone, then they trip on the bottle and fall down the stairs. And it's like, I mean, sloths have claws, right? Like, let me see, like, a Wolverine. And even towards the end, you kind of get that. But, I mean, this movie was so awful. I am going to have nightmares about how awful this movie is. This is the worst movie I have seen this year. I would rather watch last year's worst movie, Halloween Ends, 5 times over this movie. That's how bad this movie was. And so, yeah, that's been the 11 worst movies I saw in 2023. I don't recommend you guys see any of these films. They are just that bad. And hopefully you enjoy the best 11 films of 2023 that I'm going to be doing in about a week or two. I want to watch 2 to 3 more movies before finalizing that list, because those 2 or 3 movies, it's like, I think that might be on the list. So with all that being said, my name's Christopher Connell with 11 Hour Views, and that will be all for today.